Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, this is one I've been looking forward to for a little while. We've been, kind of doing our off-season sort of programming for a little while. We talked about some previous great games and that kind of stuff. We get to finally start diving into a little spring football today. We're starting our spring preview series. We're starting with the quarterbacks. People generally are somewhat interested in those, but we're heading into, I think, what's going to be a very, very interesting spring ball for Ohio State, because there's a lot I think we're going to learn over the next, month and a half, 2 months, give or take. So I am super excited to dive into today's show.
Yeah, and the quarterback situation at Ohio State may be more laid out than any of the other positions. So I really had to do some work, Tom, to come up with some topics to talk about with this quarterback situation, because it seems like everybody has a pretty good handle on where things are. And, as I'm looking through this, I'm thinking, so we'll just start with the depth chart. I'm going to say, and you can disagree if you want.
Wrong.
CJ Stroud, then Kyle McCord, then Devin Brown. And I don't know that if you want to argue, you can, Tom. I've heard your opinions on what you consider great games, exciting games of the 2000s. So if you want to weigh in there, but this feels like really we're just throwing this out there just to, okay, here's what the depth chart is. I don't expect any change through the spring. I don't think there can be any change through the spring. This is just how it is. And it's okay that it is so uniform. Like, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3. That's okay. And that's the way it should be. No drama. Should not be any drama. Just this is what it is. And you cannot dispute that.
And you know what? For once, I'm not going to dispute that. I think there's pretty much no question. You're coming off a 573-yard passing performance, 6 touchdowns in the Rose Bowl. Like, I think CJ Stroud's probably arguably the first string quarterback on this team. Maybe, possibly. But yeah, I mean, this is, this time last year, I think we were going into spring ball saying, okay, it's going to be CJ Stroud and then Jack Miller and then Kyle McCord. But then by the time you get closer to the season, once Kyle McCord's had a little bit of a chance to catch up, Kyle McCord probably catches up and passes Jack Miller. And then that's, and then it'll be CJ Stroud and then Kyle McCord and then Jack Miller going into the season. And that's pretty much exactly what it was. And you sort of had the false drama of, oh, it's an open quarterback competition. Okay. And everyone was kind of smiling and nodding along like, okay, I bet I can predict what happens. This year, you don't really have any of the kind of false drama around that. It's pretty cut and dried. And, I'll be interested to see Devin Brown this spring. And I think Devin Brown is probably, it's going to take a little while. Anytime you have a true freshman quarterback in the first spring, it's never going to look incredible to start with. You're kind of just looking at tools more or less. And then, recognizing like, yeah, he's a true freshman. He's going to make some mistakes. But, if as this season goes along, I'll be interested to see, how close he can get to McCord. But I think, I would be pretty surprised if if all 3 guys are healthy, if the season does not start Stroud, McCord, Brown going into game 1.
I'm interested to see Devin Brown as well. Remember when we saw Justin Fields for the first time and he threw it differently than anybody else there. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately for Devin Brown, he comes into a quarterback room where you're probably, if you throw it differently than the other 2 guys, it's probably because you don't throw it as well. So you don't want to be different. You want to be very similar to how they throw the ball. But I am still interested to watch him and see what he can do and see how he performs. And, what's his rep number? Like where is it 1-1-1 for everybody? Is it, is it, 2-2 for 2 reps for Stroud, 2 reps for McCord, and 1 for Devin Brown? Is that how they do it? But so as I'm putting this rundown together, then you're asking, what are the biggest questions in this quarterback room? Because I don't know that CJ Stroud has many questions that will be answered in the spring. And really, this is a spring preview. We're not going to talk too much about the season because that's what the season previews are for. in July and August when we really need to do them. But one question I have, Tom, is about Kyle McCord. We saw him get a start last year. That's more than most Ohio State true freshman quarterbacks have ever received. And so obviously you would expect him to be very good. We've seen Ohio State redshirt freshman quarterbacks play very well in the past, JT Barrett included. Obviously, CJ Stroud, you would expect Kyle McCord to be ready to take over a program. Not that he has to this year unless something terrible happens. But I'm wondering, Tom, if there was an open draft of Big Ten quarterbacks in the Big Ten, where does McCord go? Like what? I think if we were to draft them right now between you and me, you go CJ Stroud 1, and then who is 2? Is it? I know we both have high hopes, high feelings for JJ McCarthy, but does somebody go? Talia Tagovailoa, Sean Clifford, Cade McNamara.
I'm picking for upside, so I think there's really only 2 choices for me, and those are Kyle McCord and JJ McCarthy, and I kind of want to see what things look like this spring. We saw more of JJ McCarthy last year than we did of Kyle McCord, just because Michigan does not have CJ Stroud on their depth chart, so therefore it is a little harder to crack the field at Ohio State than it is at Michigan at the quarterback position right now. I think those 2 quarterbacks, McCord and McCarthy, are going to be linked for a long time. Those are 2 guys who both, were interested in coming to Ohio State, and Ryan Day kind of got to take his pick, and he made his pick, and so here's Kyle McCord, and there is JJ McCarthy. And McCarthy had probably a more productive freshman year, but again, there's a little context there. But yeah, I think it's those 2 guys, because I don't know that, Tagovailoa looks like he looks good, but he doesn't look incredible. And you've seen him fail. And I feel like you've seen kind of the upside that he has, and it's good, but it's not incredible. Sean Clifford, I don't think, no. I don't see anyone else having the upside that those 2 guys do, so it's one of those 2 guys in some order. Get back to me after spring ball when I can give you a more detailed answer.
I think since you're drafting from if we're drafting based on record, you're probably drafting from the bottom, so you want a guy like maybe McCarthy who can get out of trouble with his legs a bit better than Kyle McCord, so maybe you'd have JJ McCarthy go second, and I think McCord's going to go high, and it's obviously you've got what he was able to do at Ohio State was just a small sample, but when you look at the arm and everything else that Ohio State choosing him, Ryan Day choosing him, and that's certainly a guy that I'm guessing everybody else in the Big Ten offered, or if they didn't offer, it's because they figured they had no shot. So now if there was this fantasy draft, now is your opportunity to go and get him now. And I think he can play well this year for any Big Ten team, including Ohio State. And again, my one of my bold predictions for the 2022 season was 8 touchdown passes for Kyle McCord this season. Tom, you did not have him throwing any touchdown passes, if I recall, in your bold predictions.
I don't think that's exactly right, but
yeah. No, that's exactly how I recall it. I don't know if I'm right, but it's how I recall it.
I know if you're right. I'll explain after we're done whether you're right or not. Spoiler alert, no. But what's kind of an interesting conversation to me on these guys, because I think we're probably in the same ballpark with McCarthy and McCord being 2-3 probably in that draft. What's maybe a more interesting conversation to me is, where did Drew Aller and Devin Brown fit? Because those 2 guys are, again, very high upside guys. And, Drew Aller, I think Ohio State fans are probably familiar with him, Medina quarterback from Northeast Ohio. Very talented guy who Ohio State was maybe looking at trying to bring into the class after Quinn Ewers enrolled early. He was pretty much set at Penn State. So then Ryan Day, as he does sometimes, has to settle for the player that ended up ranked number 1 overall in the class in Devin Brown. Sometimes these things work out for you. How about that? But, you could make an argument for those 2 guys to be ahead of the majority of the starters in the Big Ten. Frankly, I think I'm probably picking Drew Aller over Sean Clifford at this point, because Sean Clifford, you've seen what Sean Clifford is and isn't at this point, and he's, this is his 6th year. He is what he is at this point. So I think, maybe you pick a Tagovailoa, maybe you pick a Cade McNamara over those guys if it's like we're talking specifically this year. But I don't know that those are both givens. And, just you want to Purdue's quarterbacks back, like maybe
Plummer.
Is Plummer back? Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would have probably taken O'Connell over them, but I mean, you think through the rest of the league, and it's like anyone at Rutgers, no. Anyone in Indiana, no. Anyone at
Aiden O'Connell is back.
Aiden O'Connell is back. So you maybe Aiden O'Connell, but
he might be the second
and
guy.
honestly, I can't remember who's transferred into Nebraska because they had a couple guys. I think one of the Texas quarterbacks transferred into Nebraska, so maybe. But you get to those guys. You get to Drew Aller. You get to Drew Brown or Devin Brown pretty quickly on that list. Those guys are probably both. If you're really picking from scratch, those guys are both probably like top 6, 7 picks in the league, which is pretty remarkable for guys who've never taken a snap.
Yeah, Texas quarterback Casey Thompson transferring to Nebraska, and there was somebody else, Chubba Purdy as well. But as we're talking about this, I'm wondering who would Pat Fitzgerald feel most comfortable with, and I keep thinking like Cade McNamara, because you don't want your quarterback to be too good. You want to know what you're going to get out of him, and you don't always need good stuff. You just want to know that he's going to be smart and careful, and sometimes he'll throw interceptions, but, just you don't want to be too good.
The Northwestern vibes coming off of Noah Vedral, I don't know if he's coming back, but the Northwestern vibes off Noah Vedral are pretty strong, too. So,
yeah, he's back at Rutgers as well. So, yeah, I do wonder, like, how far down, because you're talking about who's going to play this year. How many of these guys would these returning quarterbacks be drafted ahead of the top freshmen? And at some point there becomes a point of where you're going to get mistakes from Devin Brown and Drew Aller, but you're also going to get some plays, and you're getting mistakes out of the guys you're starting anyway. So you may as well go with the young guys. And so then all of this Devin Brown talk has me just wondering where he is in relation to where Kyle McCord was last year, and where CJ Stroud was this year when he was a true freshman. Like, is this just how Ohio State does quarterbacks now? Is this how Ryan Day does quarterbacks now? You get them in, which is obviously very important. You get them in for winter, the workout, you see how that goes. You get them in for spring ball. It's 15 practices. It is immense in the development of a quarterback, especially if you might need them this year. I don't expect that to happen, but the more practice you can give a guy, obviously, the better, and especially at quarterback where he can learn. To be able to learn from CJ Stroud and then bounce stuff off of Kyle McCord. Like, it's not the deepest room, Tom, but I think it's almost certainly the most talented room in the Big Ten in terms of quarterbacks.
I don't know who else would have a real compelling argument against that. You've got a 5-star guy, you've got another 5-star guy, and then you've got the guy who was just rated the number 1 overall player. I mean, like, I think you could make a compelling case that you could put the rest of, Ohio State versus the field in the Big Ten, and Ohio State might win that one in terms of most talented quarterback rooms overall. And that doesn't mean Devin Brown is a national championship caliber quarterback right this very minute. He's got some learning to do. He's got some development to do, but that's, he's got some time to do it too. And, we have not seen Ohio State ever get to their 4th string quarterback, I don't think, in a real significant situation. We have rather famously seen them get to the 3rd stringer once, but generally, if you've got a couple guys, you're in pretty good shape. And then if, by the time you would get to a 3rd string quarterback, you're generally later in the year when potentially he'd have a little more time to develop. So, but yeah, I think Ohio State's in a pretty good spot. And in terms of expectations for Devin Brown this year, I think look at some of the true freshman seasons going back and keep those in mind when you're talking about what you might expect out of him. I mean, CJ Stroud and Jack Miller did not throw a pass 2 years ago. Now, that was a little bit of an anomaly, but last year, Jack Miller played just very sparingly. Look at Joe Burrow's numbers from 2017 when he was the 3rd string guy. He played very sparingly. He was 8 for 13 or something like that. That's kind of what you might expect from Devin Brown, and maybe they're going to try and get him a little more action than that, just because you can do the 4-game redshirt thing, and you're going to try and keep everyone happy and keep everyone involved and engaged and all that kind of stuff. But that's probably a reasonable expectation for him. But when you hear people talk about him, they talk about him the way they talked about Kyle McCord, the way they talked about CJ Stroud a couple of years ago, where this is a guy who kind of can do all this stuff, and you got to, now he's got to sort of develop and work with Ryan Day and Corey Dennis and refine his craft and learn the playbook and all that kind of stuff. But all the tools are there. There was always kind of a little bit of, Jack Miller's kind of like a half step behind Kyle McCord. Like that was kind of the conversation around him for a lot of the time he was in Columbus. It was just like he wasn't quite, or he was a half step behind CJ Stroud or a half step behind Kyle McCord. Like it was good, but it wasn't quite as good. You don't hear the yeah buts with Devin Brown. So I think, my assumption is you have to be patient. You have to understand that this is a true freshman who is, yes, enrolling early, but it's going to take a little while to really, truly get up to speed. But when he does get up to speed, I think, the ceiling there is probably potentially another very good Ohio State quarterback.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what he eventually will be, and we'll get the first look this spring. Of course, I have famously compared him to Joe Burrow, so because of his ability to run the ball a little bit as well, and just the leadership style that he, I don't want to say the goofball leadership style, but he has described himself as a goofball. We know Joe Burrow, kind of a goofball back in his Ohio State days, with the 3 Wolf Moon t-shirts and the Simpsons stuff that he used to wear and SpongeBob stuff. So like they don't take themselves that seriously, but they take the position and the role seriously. That's interesting to me because I think it's a way to endear yourself to teammates because you're not the most serious guy. You can have fun with them, but you are also the most serious guy, like when it comes to the field and things like that. And so he can bring guys along and you start to develop that leadership aspect early on. And as a quarterback, it can tend to be natural for you and it should be natural for you. Now you look at last year, Jack Miller, 7 of 14 throwing the ball. It wouldn't shock me to see similar numbers for Devin Brown this year. I think you're going to get Kyle McCord some opportunities because I think there will be a bunch of blowouts. I expect Devin Brown to throw the ball, unlike what happened in 2020 with CJ Stroud and Jack Miller. But of course, that was a pandemic year, so all stats are off and skewed that year. But I expect him to play a little bit. No reason not to get his 4 games in unless there's just no opportunity.
And I can't imagine there's not going to be an opportunity. I mean, you're playing Arkansas State, you're playing Toledo. Like these are games where you should be able to get at least a couple drives for these guys. And you don't want to do what they ended up having to do with Quinn Ewers last year, which was like, okay, you're going to hand the ball off 3 times at the very, 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 very end of this game. You want to get him a little more rep, a little more time, but getting Kyle McCord really 100% up to speed and ready to be the starter, because he is one bullet away, as they say in the military. Like you're one snap away from potentially being the starter who has to go continue the quest for the Big Ten championship and national championship. So he getting him ready is going to be kind of the number one priority this spring, I think. But yeah, having Devin Brown engaged, have him, continue to develop and grow, where he, a year from now when CJ Stroud is gone, spoiler alert, CJ Stroud possibly going to the NFL after this season. Must credit Buckeye Weekly podcast with that exclusive nugget. You have to get Devin Brown ready to be in a position that Kyle McCord is in now, because this time next year, those 2 guys are going to be fighting for the starting job. And you are going to, Devin Brown is going to want to probably be the starter a year from now. Kyle McCord is going to want to be the starter a year from now. So you need to have those 2 guys ready to really have a legitimate quarterback battle a year from now. So we'll see how that one goes. But that's not going to be your top priority. But they are definitely going to want to get him some real legitimate snaps as often as they can. You've got Rutgers coming to Columbus this year. You should be able to get Devin Brown some snaps against Rutgers. You've got Arkansas State. You've got Toledo. You're going to have another game that they win by 1,000,000 points, where it's like, okay, get him some extra snaps there. So, yeah, it's it's going to be a year where you're going to see all 3 guys, I think, if they're all healthy. But I think there's going to be a very clear delineation of number 1, number 2, number 3, pretty much all season.
Yeah, and it kind of leads to my next question: how much work does CJ Stroud need this spring? And how much of that delineation does he need this spring? How many reps does he need? Obviously, you're going to continue to work. I think there is value in having him continue to work as normal in order to build up a rapport with the new receivers, And that includes Marvin Harrison, Emeka Egbuka, Julian Fleming, Jaden Ballard, like not just any freshmen that are here. I think it's just Caleb Burton and Keon Grace. But you're going to have 2 new starters. And so, yes, they do work in the offseason, and they work during camp, during practice, off times on their own, building that rapport. So a lot of that is done outside of practice, but I think it's still valuable in practice for CJ Stroud to get as much work as they feel comfortable with. I was just thinking, is there a concern about overworking him? And we saw what happened with his shoulder last year, but that was an early season thing. Then things got better, and it's not like he had less work as the season went on. They had more work, and his shoulder was just fine. So I don't know that there's any concern there. I just don't know how much they need to push him in the spring when this could be a pretty good opportunity for both McCord and Devin Brown.
Yeah, I think you have to get Stroud ready for the year, obviously, but I don't think getting Stroud ready for the year is going to involve that much. He's now been through the playbook for a couple of years. He started last year, did fairly well last year, and so he's not going to be in the 2,000 rep club thing where they're going to be sitting him for the whole spring. I don't think, but you're probably going to see a little bit more even split of reps between him and McCord, I would expect, throughout the course of the season and at least through the spring and then maybe into the summer, because they want to get McCord up to speed as much as they can. You can't sit him. You can't do nothing. But I think they would probably, what I would have expected of Justin Fields in the 2020 season, where he'd been there for a year, he'd had a very good year. If they had a normal spring in 2020, what I would have expected from Justin Fields is, okay, you're going to get 50, 60% of the reps, but also you're going to see 30% for some of the freshmen to kind of get them up to speed and make sure they're really ready to go as needed, because you need to have that backup ready. That is a very, very important spot on the field. And, a quarterback who's just, if you're used to an A+ quarterback or at least an A quarterback, a B quarterback or even a B+ quarterback, that changes the ceiling for your offense. That changes the ceiling for your team a little bit. So they've got to make sure Kyle McCord is up to, he's got to be at least an A-, you would think, heading into the year. So that'll be a big thing for them to focus on. But yeah, I do expect to see a good number of reps for Kyle McCord, and maybe Devin Brown, as the spring wears on, gets to the point where he's he's getting 10% of the reps or the one, something like that. I would bet when you get to the spring game, you're not going to see a ton of, you're not going to see CJ Stroud in the second half. You will probably see, a quarter and a half of CJ Stroud, maybe something like that. It feels like that's probably maybe more in line with what to kind of expect in that spring game from him, rather than last year where he played at least the full first half and maybe a little into the second half as well.
And we know Ryan Day wants 4 scholarship quarterbacks on the roster. Right now they have 3. They would have to go to the portal, which they wouldn't do almost certainly until after spring, unless they surprise us and grab somebody before spring. But also, if he sees what he likes, if he's happy with what he sees, do they need to go to the portal? And it's not just a portal. Also isn't just a one-way street. Like, you have to have somebody that wants to come into this situation where you're no better than the number 3 guy, and don't get in the way of the number 4 guy. You are an emergency guy that you are insurance, and we hope not to use you. And if we do have to use you, we're not going to use you initially. We're going to use other people. We're going to pay out of pocket first, and then we might go to you. And you got to find the right guy for that. You got to find a guy who basically likes playing, knows that that's not his future, would like to go chase a ring, chase some winning, basically, be in a successful place, maybe want to go into coaching, play under Ryan Day, get that coaching career started, that sort of thing, kind of like a Gardner Minshew was going to do with Nick Saban in Alabama before Mike Leach came and called him. Yeah. So it's once you filter all of the things to find your guy, there's probably not many candidates left that would want to take part. So it's almost going to be happenstance if they're able to add somebody. It just happens to be exactly what you're looking for, and Ohio State happens to be agreeable to him.
Yeah, and I mean, the sort of prototype for this, and I have not gone back and looked to see if there's even anyone that fits this profile, but 2018 recruiting class, 2019 recruiting class, the 3-star quarterback from Ohio or some neighboring state who maybe grew up a Buckeye fan, but, maybe camped at Ohio State, but didn't, this is kind of the Gunnar Hoke profile where his dad had played for Ohio State. He grew up in Dublin, he camped at Ohio State, didn't get an offer, goes to play at Kentucky, is kind of a rotational guy, backup guy at Kentucky. And then he comes back and, just plays kind of sparingly, but, gets a chance to play, gets a chance to go to the college football playoff as a Buckeye. So, that's kind of the profile you're looking at here. And I haven't gone back, like I said, to look and see who might actually fit that profile. But, that's the kind of guy you're looking for. And this sort of, this goes into one of the conversations we've had in the past about should they start to look at bringing in a 3-star Ohio kid with the understanding, like, look, is there a kid that is willing to come to Ohio State with the understanding that, look, I'm not necessarily going to ever start at Ohio State. I'm coming to Ohio State to be the veteran, the savvy veteran presence for multiple years. That's probably a tough sell for Ohio State, but that's the kind of thing that might benefit them long term to add a second quarterback to the class who kind of comes in with that transfer mindset as a true freshman, if that works out. But again, that's you are threading a pretty fine needle there to find a guy who is good enough to be worth bringing in who can, potentially play at the Ohio State level or close to the Ohio State level, but who also is willing to not expect to play at the Ohio State, to play as a starter at Ohio State. That is threading a pretty fine needle there.
I've got a name for you, Tom. From the 2018 Ohio class, out of Shelby, Ohio, Brennan Armstrong. Now, granted, Is he a very productive starting quarterback at Virginia? Yes.
I was going to say yes. I think he may be occupied, but
he was the number 27 player in the state, the number 1 quarterback overall in Ohio. Now, another guy, Chase Wolf. That's went to Wisconsin, has not worked out there. He may have already transferred out of there, but a St. Xavier guy out of Cincinnati. There are those kinds of guys where you're looking for a Chris Chuganoff. Although Chris Chuganoff again had starting experience, Gunnar Hoke starting experience, so it's hard to find those guys. The starting experience, then basically they get replaced, and they're looking to move on. They're not out there a lot.
Yeah, and I was just Googling Chase Wolf to see if he had transferred yet. And, Ohio head coach Urban Meyer did ask him to flip after he had committed. So that's before one of our games. He's friends with St. Xavier coach Steve Specht. And he was like, so we're going to be able to flip you, right? And he's like, no, we'll see you in the Big Ten championship. So that's that's pretty funny. So, yeah, I mean, and again, the Wisconsin thing has not necessarily worked out for him. But, yeah, I mean, that's maybe the kind of guy who maybe you can talk him into coming back to Ohio and playing for the Buckeyes, but he may be happy at Wisconsin. Wisconsin is he'll get to come back to Ohio to play the Buckeyes this year with Wisconsin, so maybe that's enough of a draw for him.
So then you look at the areas of concern, which we'll do for all of these positions, and I don't know what the area of concern for the Ohio State quarterback is, other than possible sophomore slump for CJ Stroud. Not that I'm expecting that. This is his contract year. This should be his most serious year. But you see him at the Super Bowl, Tom. You see him, hanging out with celebrities. Is this really what you want your starting quarterback to be doing when he should be at home studying or at the WAC throwing the football? Like, there should be no personal lives for any of these people. They should not be having fun. They should be working, because when they're not working, they are on the precipice of letting down the fans by not getting better, by trying to have a personal life that's selfish. And is that really what you want out of your starter? But really, when you look at like the area of concern, what is the biggest area of concern for Ohio State quarterbacks? Is it, I can't even say lack of experience, because you have 2 quarterbacks who have started games. Like that's not everybody has that. And so what's the biggest area of concern, Tom? Just lack of numbers. And really, you've got 3 5 stars. How can that be a concern? You are so spoiled.
Yeah, and I like the fact that you were either being sarcastic there, or I know about 7 of your Twitter burners. One of the two. Definitely one of those two. Yeah, I guess the concern is, what if CJ Stroud gets hurt and Kyle McCord isn't quite ready to play at the CJ Stroud level, which is, I mean, that would be understandable. CJ Stroud was not ready to play at the what is the current CJ Stroud level at the start of last year, so it's probably not fair to expect Kyle McCord to be there right now. But I mean, you have all the raw materials there to play at the CJ Stroud level in terms of arm strength and accuracy and all that kind of stuff. And now he's been in the program for a full year and probably understands the playbook a lot better. And you have all the raw materials there to be able to replace a CJ Stroud, even if it's just 90% of CJ Stroud, because he's a year behind right now. Okay, that's still pretty darn good, and that's good enough to get you through pretty much all the season. So yeah, I mean, outside of a ton of injuries in that room, something like that, I mean, not having 4 guys is, I guess, a little bit of a concern. That's, as you said, something Day would prefer to have 4 scholarship quarterbacks. So okay, they're going to want to get another guy in there. But yeah, there are going to be positions where I think we have bigger conversations about concerns. This is one where outside of some kind of an serious outbreak of injuries or something like that, things are looking pretty decent right now heading into spring ball.
Yeah, I would agree. And so the last thing I want to do, and we'll do these for each of the position previews, is just a quick rundown, a quick preview of what is going on at Michigan. And we have talked about that already in this show with Kyle McCord, or with JJ McCarthy and Cade McNamara. Cade McNamara is returning as a starter. I believe he's headed for his 4th-year junior year. JJ McCarthy headed for his sophomore year. They have a pair of 3-star true freshmen. Both are already enrolled, so they'll have 4 scholarship quarterbacks in, and they have a bunch of walk-ons as well. Dan Villari is gone, so that's unfortunate. But I think this is still going to be one of the most fascinating position battles to watch, because I just wonder how long you can keep J.J. McCarthy patient. And if Cade McNamara is your established starter, how does J.J. McCarthy take that? We know he's a very confident player. Does he come to spring saying, yeah, you can tell me all day long that Cade McNamara is a starter, but I know I'm going to beat him out in the fall? That would be the best thing for Michigan, I think, to have, if he has that attitude. Like, if he feels like, yeah, trust me, don't worry, I'm not scared of Cade McNamara, and he comes in and just takes the job, then you've got both of them with the J.J. McCarthy who eventually starts. If it's just, this is Cade McNamara's offense and we're going to use J.J. McCarthy as one of our skill players, and that's not going to be good enough, and it shouldn't be. And you look at the way they use some of their players times, where Andrew Anthony, 40-yard catch, then that's his only catch of the game, or this and that. I'm just fascinated by how this is going to turn out, and I'm wondering how much drama there will be.
Yeah, that's the really interesting thing, where Ohio State, I think, is coming in, and you kind of know what the pecking order is at Ohio State. I don't know that Michigan knows what the pecking order is between McNamara and McCarthy. I know what I think it should be. I think they need to turn the reins over to JJ McCarthy, because you have to have a higher ceiling at this point. And I don't know that Jim Harbaugh thinks that way necessarily. He may look at, maybe Cade McNamara is a little less mistake prone than JJ McCarthy. I mean, I think that would be a mistake. But then the question is, how do those two guys view it? Does JJ McCarthy feel like he's getting a legitimate shake? If he has a better spring, but Harbaugh is still kind of leaning on McNamara, does that tick McCarthy off and he leaves? If McCarthy looks like he's maybe taking the job, does that tick McNamara off and he leaves? And I think that's going to be a very delicate thing to balance. And if you're having a little bit of a slower start to the year, I mean, their schedule is such that they're not going to lose games, but if the offense looks a little more ragged, and you start having those "what's wrong with Michigan" kind of conversations, how is that going to play? Are those guys both going to be willing to? Is Cade McNamara going to be willing to split time this year? Is JJ McCarthy going to be willing to split time again this year, after he's sort of seen, like, the offense sometimes runs better with me, maybe I should be the quarterback full time? That's going to be a real difficult thing to balance. And if one of them does leave at some point, Then, Ohio State has a guy who is a 5-star who has started a game last year and has a year of experience under his belt as a backup. And then they have a 5-star as the third string. If one of those guys leaves, then you get 2 true freshmen, 3 stars behind them, and then you're one play away from disaster. So that's that I think is a concern. I think the answer is McCarthy. I truly don't know what Jim Harbaugh thinks the answer is going to be. And they just changed their quarterback coach. Their quarterback coach is now Matt Weiss. He came from he played coach for the Baltimore Ravens before this. He's kind of been all over the field. He coached on defense for a while. Then he coached quarterbacks from 2016 to 17. Then he coached wide receivers in 2018. Then he coached running backs in 2019, 2020. So that tells me this is going to be Jim Harbaugh coaching the quarterbacks, and this guy is also there kind of thing. Because he is not, this is not a QB guru who has been there for a million years. So I'm going to be very interested to see. Like I said, my inclination is they should give McCarthy the starting job, and if McNamara transfers, and that's, it is what it is. You kind of have to play for upside. I don't get the sense that that's what Harbaugh's going to do. He may try and kind of split the baby like King Solomon, and I don't know that that's going to necessarily work in the transfer portal era.
Yeah, I will say Weiss was there last year, so he was the quarterback's coach last year, but it was really, he did work with him, but you've obviously got Jim Harbaugh there. Mm-hmm. I expect it's going to be McNamara again, and Jim Harbaugh is a conservative guy, so why should we expect anything other than a conservative approach? And then you just, J.J. McCarthy has said he's not going anywhere. We'll see. Certainly not going to chase him out if he's happy with being the guy who comes in and 6-7 plays a game. There's a role for him, and that's you do that for a couple of years, and then you take over, and then you go to the NFL, and it's not a bad life, certainly. So that will do it. Tom, anything else you want to mention?
No, just when I was looking at the Matt Weiss press release to get his background on the Michigan side, I was saying, oh, that was this recently? Okay, well, yes, it was dated 2021. Look, if you expect me to know what year it is, Tony, I don't think this podcast is going to work out. I'm sorry.
I apologize, Tom. That's my fault for thinking you would understand years. Of course, we won't make that mistake again. We probably shouldn't even go into days or number. We know numbers is not really what I do. Maybe. Is there some sort of an SP plus for years, Tom, that would help you out? I don't know.
Maybe, but I have to, it probably hasn't been invented yet here in 1997. Sorry.
It was going back and looking at all the old games from the 2000s that has completely screwed up your brain.
That's what did it. Yeah. It's still 2007 where I am. And Ohio State is going to put up 14 points and beat Michigan this year. Absolutely. That's where we are. Watch out for that season opener, Michigan.
Yeah, that's 2007. I have a really good feeling they're going to stop Juice Williams on this third down. I get a pretty good feeling about this one. So just hold on, everybody. So that will do it for this episode. I want to thank you all for tuning in as always. And we will talk to you guys later.